Hello guys, this is Alex of Man vs. Q, and today is going to be my very first 7x7 main of 3 on my channel. This was a 3-minute and 47-second main of 3. I am not very consistent on 7x7, but this was a pretty decent main of 3 for me, so that was pretty nice. Today, I'm going to share a story about, well, basically my love and hate relationship on NASCAR. While NASCAR is something that I have enjoyed for quite a long time, at least since the end of 2007, unfortunately, no matter how much you really love a sport, while it can have many pros, unfortunately, it doesn't come without any cons either. So basically, this is going to be my very own review on pretty much what NASCAR has become, in my point of view. Now let me explain how I started watching NASCAR in the first place. Back in 2007, a race just so happened to be on TV, and I think two of my uncles came to visit, and they asked my mom if they could turn on the race. And my Uncle Andrew had mentioned a certain driver driving a red-colored number 8 car, sponsored by Budweiser, by the name of Dale Earnhardt Jr. I remembered that I had just watched the famous movie by Pixar, Cars, and I remembered seeing a character who made a cameo appearance in Cars, known only by the name of Junior. As it turned out, that number 8 car in the movie just so happened to be the voice of Dale Earnhardt Jr. himself. As soon as I recognized who that driver actually was, I instantly started rooting for him, just starting to win races. But boy, I could not have joined NASCAR at the worst possible time. Little did I realize at the time that Dale Earnhardt Jr. had fallen into a hole that was very hard to dig out. For the first time in his career, Dale Earnhardt Jr. had failed to win a single race that season, and in the process, suffering 9 DNFs. This is ultimately what led to Dale Earnhardt Jr. leaving Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, his father's team that he had driven ever since his rookie season in 2000, to move up to Hendrick Motorsports to possibly explore better opportunities. I thought it was disappointing enough to watch Dale Earnhardt Jr. go through all of his struggles to get back in victory lane. But then there was Jimmie Johnson, who at the time was NASCAR's dominator. Of course, after seeing Johnson win at least a couple of times, it didn't really matter for me at the time because I was totally new to the sport and I didn't really know who I liked and who I didn't like. But my uncles had followed the sport for quite some time, and they told me that they didn't really like to see Johnson win because he won too many times. And then I remembered the 2 races back in 2008 that truly changed my point of view. During a race at Martinsville, at the time, I had actually missed an opportunity to see Dale Earnhardt Jr. win live on TV, as he had won at Michigan earlier that year, but I didn't get a chance to watch. And I thought Dale Earnhardt Jr. had a chance to win the fall race at Martinsville back in 2008, and his teammate Jimmie Johnson ended up beating him, and I thought that was disappointing. Then we got to the second last race of the season, which would be at Phoenix, and I thought Kurt Busch would have a shot to win that race. And I wanted to see Kurt Busch win, as I had already seen his younger brother Kyle win a few races, and I had started to become a fan of the Busch brothers. I pretty much became a fan of Busch brothers because I thought that it's pretty interesting to see some family rivalry in a sport, whether it's basketball or hockey or racing, whatever. And of course, in that race at Phoenix, Kurt Busch would come up short to once again Jimmie Johnson. And then it finally got to me, you know what, my uncles are exactly right. This guy does win too many times, and it doesn't give us too much opportunity to see someone else win a race. Of course, we got to the final race at Homestead, Miami, where I would see Carl Edwards win the final race of the season and get to see him do his victory backflip, which I remember being totally amazing. And of course, my father became a huge fan of Carl Edwards because of his backflip. Of course, being a total newbie to the sport at the time, I was happy to see Carl Edwards win the race, but I didn't realize that there was also a championship involved. And come to think of it, I don't think I even knew at the time what a championship actually was in NASCAR. Carl Edwards might have won the battle in the final race at Homestead, Miami back in 2008, but to Jimmie Johnson, he lost the war. And Jimmie Johnson would go out to win his third consecutive championship. The one thing that I remember about the 2009 season was seeing Mark Martin perform very well since he started racing for Hendrick Motorsports. He was like between 49 and 50 at the time, if I could remember, and he showed such competitive speed, and he still proved capable to win races, and even had a shot to win the championship that year. Unfortunately, he ended up falling short to, once again, Jimmie Johnson, who would go on to win 4 in a row. In 2010, Jimmie Johnson went on to win 3 of the first 5 races, still looking like he could continue his domination. But then Denny Hamlin came along, who was just fresh off of his best season yet in 2009, winning 4 races that season, and this year he really came to life. Denny would go on to win 8 races that year, and I thought for sure at the time that if anybody could take down Jimmie Johnson, this is the guy. And that is when Hamlin instantly became my favorite driver. Unfortunately, going into the final 2 races of the season, 2 mistakes would cost Denny Hamlin the championship. First, at Phoenix, Denny Hamlin would have trouble in pit road, which would cause his pit crew not to give him enough fuel to make it to the end of the race. And Hamlin would end up 12 laps shy on fuel and would have no choice but to make an extra pit stop, ultimately cutting his lead from over 30 points to only 15 going into Homestead. And things would only go from bad to worse going into Homestead for Denny. Hamlin would have to start in the rear of the field after a horrible qualifying effort. And although early in the race he was able to make significant progress, moving his way forward, at least into the top 20, next thing you know, just slight contact with Greg Biffle, and Hamlin would be sent into a spin in the grass, and although he was able to keep it off the wall, the damage was done. Hamlin suffered damage on his right front fender of his car, and was never able to fully recover, as he would finish outside the top 10, and Jimmie Johnson would finish second, and ridiculously, for the 5th year in a row, would win the championship. Eventually, Jimmie Johnson's domination streak would come to an end in 2011, when he would win only 2 races that season, and would finish 6th in the standings, never even finishing outside the top 10 of his career at the time. Then in 2012, he started winning races again, but that year he would fall up short to Brad Keselowski after a very disappointing final 2 races at Phoenix and Homestead. But then next thing you know, in 2013, it would prove to be a year of bad luck for me, as Jimmie Johnson would go on to win the Daytona 500 and win 5 more races that year, and ultimately the championship for the 6th time. Next thing you know, 2014 came along, and a new era of the championship began. NASCAR came up with a new system that it would divide the chase into 4 rounds. The first 3 being 3 races each, before eventually going on to the championship round in Homestead, Miami. Starting in 2004, there were originally 10 drivers in the chase. Then in 2011, it extended to 12. 2014 would extend to 16 drivers, and after the first round, 3 races in, 4 drivers would be eliminated from the championship run, which would cut it down to 12. And then the next 3 races, 12 would go to 8. And the final elimination round would cut 8 in half into 4. which would leave it up to 4 drivers to fight for the championship at Homestead, Miami. As soon as we got to Homestead, all the drivers would have to do was to finish ahead of each other. If not winning the race, just finish one position ahead of each other, and whoever finishes the highest in the race will be the champion. It seemed a little ridiculous at the time, but I decided to give the new point system a shot. And of course, did I forget to mention that in order to make the playoffs, which is eventually what NASCAR would call the chase, as it had become basically its own version of a playoff system, the year started off pretty well, with Dale Earnhardt Jr. winning the Daytona 500, and we had many different winners that season, including 2 drivers getting their first win, Eric Almirola and AJ Allmendinger. During the round of 12, Jimmie Johnson would be one of 4 drivers to be eliminated, and he would go on to finish a disappointing 11th in points. His worst season points finish at the time. Kevin Harvick almost didn't even make it to Homestead, Miami, as he had suffered a DNF in the round of 8, but would go on to win at Phoenix and punch his ticket to the round of 4. He would then go on to win the final race at Homestead to claim his first ever NASCAR Cup Series championship. 2015 proved to be a totally controversial ending in the championship. Kyle Busch, who had suffered a broken leg and a broken foot after a very scary accident at the Xfinity Series race at Daytona in February, would go on to have one of the most amazing comebacks in NASCAR history, winning 4 races that season before the playoffs started, finishing 30th in points in the regular season championship, and giving him enough points to punch his ticket into the playoffs. And of course, because NASCAR always resets the points once the playoffs begin, Kyle Busch was very much given a chance. He would go on to consistently point his way through every round of the playoffs, and would make it to Homestead, Miami, where he would go on to win the race and the 2015 NASCAR Cup Series Playoff Championship. Although I was a fan of Kyle Busch at the time, it seemed totally ridiculous that he could possibly win a championship after missing the first 11 races of the season. And that's when I finally started wondering, what would the result of this championship be like under the older point system? As it turned out, as I looked up, Kyle Busch would not be able to win the 2015 championship if it was under the 2003 point system, when the playoffs did not even exist back then. And if the 2003 point system was still in play, Jimmie Johnson would not have won 5 championships in a row. If NASCAR did not come out with a chase in 2004, Jeff Gordon would have been the champion instead of Kurt Busch in 2004. Tony Stewart still would have won the 2005 championship. Jimmie Johnson still would have won the 2006 championship over Matt Kenseth. But Jeff Gordon would have won the 2007 championship, and Carl Edwards in 2008. Jimmie Johnson still would have won in 2009, but he wouldn't have won in 2010, and neither would Denny Hamlin. It would have been Kevin Harvick who would win the championship in 2010 under the older point system. And Tony Stewart wouldn't win if it was under the older point system in 2011. It would have been Carl Edwards for the second time. In 2012, it still would have been Brad Keselowski. And 2013, as much as I don't like to say it, it still would have been Jimmie Johnson. In 2014, Jeff Gordon would go on to claim his 7th championship in NASCAR, tying Dale Earnhardt and Richard Petty for the most all time, while Kevin Harvick would win the 2015 championship instead of Kyle Busch. And Jimmie Johnson did not win in 2016. It was Kevin Harvick if it was under the older point system. Jimmie Johnson won 2 of the first 5 races in 2016, but when we got to the summer, he got himself in a hole that was very hard to dig out. And of course, as soon as the points reset once we got to the playoffs, he was given a chance to have a comeback. He was so inconsistent the whole summer, there's absolutely no way, if the playoffs did not even exist, that he would be able to make that good of a comeback. Even if he was able to win a few more times that year, there's no way he would have had enough points or enough time to have a comeback to win the championship that year. It is said that Kevin Harvick would have won that championship if it was under the 2003 point system. And under that old point system, Jeff Gordon would be the real 7-time champion, and Jimmy Johnson would only have 3. Johnson may be a very good driver for winning 83 races and tying Cale Yarborough for 6th on the all-time win list. But for Jimmy Johnson to win a championship all because of a playoff system, in my opinion, is asinine. If it was under the older point system, he wouldn't have that many championships. He still would have won 3, but he wouldn't have 7. I think it's absolutely unfair the way that he won those championships. Anyway, my main of 3 is just about to come to an end. There's still so many things that I would like to explain when it comes to the NASCAR point system, but we are officially out of time right now, so perhaps we will have to wait for a part 2. Anyway, here is my main of 3 at 3 minutes 47 seconds .68, which is just about where I average on 7x7. My best single solve is about 3 minutes and 26 seconds. I'm not the most consistent on 7x7, but this was a pretty good average for me. Anyway, that's all the time that I have for today. Maybe I'll make a part 2 of this, we shall see. I'm Alex Mack. Thank you all so much for watching. Until we meet again.